Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Chris Wong, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks for having me, John.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the Boston area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about nonprofit leadership generally, but more specifically, like what can nonprofit leaders do to better engage and develop and retain great employees, given that most nonprofit organizations are in a resource scarce kind of environment and context.
Right.
So you can't necessarily pay great, but what else can you do to really, engage and develop and retain those folks despite that? And we'll explore a variety of different ways that we can go about doing that. As we get started, I wanted to share Chris's bio with everybody. Chris Wong is a licensed therapist, executive coach, and co-host of The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations, a podcast for people who want to lead with more clarity, confidence, and courage by leaning into the hard conversations. With over 15 years of experience in nonprofit and healthcare sectors, Chris specializes in helping purpose-driven leaders navigate messy transitions, fix dysfunctional teams, and lead culture change that actually sticks. He's worked as a therapist, built leadership programs from scratch, and coached hundreds of leaders who were brought to him to turn things around under pressure. Chris lives outside of Boston with his wife and 2 kids and serves on a multitude and multiple nonprofit boards and runs Leadership Potential, where he coaches new nonprofit executives to lead through chaos and build high-performing, values-aligned teams. So awesome. So many really great things about what you do and your background and all you've accomplished. Anything you would like to highlight before we dive on it?
No, that's always such a high-minded summary. So I always hope that I live up to that summary.
No, I get it. Like I always get a little, nervous when people read, a bio for me if I'm like a guest on another show or on a
Yeah.
panel or speaking at a conference or something like that. And I don't love it. I don't love it when people, highlight that. But it is important, for people to understand
Sure.
like where you're coming from. Yeah, maybe we could start by just exploring a little bit about your background as a licensed therapist and how you really got into this nonprofit space as a coach and trainer and doing that kind of
Yep.
work.
Yeah. So I actually got started as a licensed therapist and I was working at a residential treatment center of a nonprofit. So adolescents lived there. And it was the specialty was just really intense that we focused on. We focused on problem sexual behaviors
Mm,
and complex and developmental trauma. So there was a lot of family therapy as well as kind of ongoing stuff with them. And I think that's where I got my first taste of really leaning into hard conversations with everybody and just having to do those kind of things. But I got burned out, and so I found my way into learning and development, which I loved because I could still contribute to the field in some way. And then when I got the opportunity to do leadership and organizational development, I think that's where I found my passion of developing leaders because I was realizing the leaders are the ones that can really set the tone. They can lead the culture change. They can coach employees better than I can ever train them, but only if they're good at it and they can set the tone. And I've seen so many examples of good leaders turning even the worst teams around and making them high performing, and then also bad leaders being given a great team and then things falling apart
yeah.
all over the place.
It makes a big difference, absolutely. And I think, your move from therapy into learning and development and coaching and kind of the HR world more broadly, I think that actually is a really great fit. I often tell people, that HR, can be oftentimes, for better or worse, kind of the therapy arm of organizations. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
like you get a lot of different things that probably other areas of the organization will never see in terms of the types of issues people are dealing with and struggling through and need accommodations for, and then trying to help, from a training and coaching and learning and development standpoint, like you're trying to help these people, all of which have stuff, right? They all have their own baggage, they have their stuff from outside of work, and you're trying to
yep,
optimize despite the fact that people aren't optimized. Like we
yeah,
all are,
yeah,
we're all super messy. And because we're all super messy, it does take, someone with a high EQ, I think, to be able to leverage the diverse talents of a team, especially if they walk into dysfunction, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there is a field of therapy or psychology called organizational psychology, which
Yeah.
focuses on that kind of thing. But I just find that having that personal experience of like gone through the different levels of an organization and seeing it firsthand is also helpful. I think that's the difference between seeing that, having that experience and just thinking about it, learning about it. And
Yeah.
so it's certainly helpful in what I do now, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, in all of your experience, you've worked with lots of different leaders, lots of different organizations. Disorganization, dysfunction, it's a common issue. In fact, pretty much every organization to some extent is going to have those issues. Maybe on a scale, more serious or severe than in other contexts. But humans are messy, and
Yeah,
organizations are just clusters of humans. So they're
that's
very
right.
they're very messy. And so like what are some of the most common types of like culture and dysfunctional issues that you tend to see in nonprofits in particular, but organizations generally? And what do you think some of the driving causes are of that?
Yeah, and I think this goes across every type of organization. I've worked in different types, and it's the people stuff that tends to be the same. I think it all comes down to this phrase, assumptions kill. I think
Yes.
so many leaders make assumptions about lots of different things about what motivates their employees. They have a mismatch there. Level of effort. They assume that because they gave a lot of effort, they're managers because they worked really hard. They did a lot of good stuff as an individual contributor or as a frontline manager. And so they're given the reins to the next level. They just kind of assume, oh, people have that same kind of motivation that I did to fix things or figure things out. So I think there's a mismatch there. They
Hmm.
assume that there's a standard operating procedures or processes that everybody knows, but
Yeah.
they really don't because there's so many assumptions that people are making about why we do work or workarounds because something doesn't work and we're not going to talk about it or fix it. So we're just going to work around it and they figure it out. And so I think it's just all these assumptions about what drives people, what motivates people, what the rules are. I think some people are just playing different games altogether about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and like that's the whole essence of cultural humility or cultural competency, whatever you want to describe it. It's not about I think it's in vogue now in kind of popular culture to think of it as like affirmative action or, not just giving extra accommodations to people that may or may not deserve it. At the heart of it, it's really about you have to learn about other people and stop assuming you know what's going on for other people.
Yeah. Assumptions. I mean, the old cliched saying, it just demonstrates your incompetence when you're making assumptions. And yeah, I think again, it's human nature. Like we all do it. Like it's unavoidable
Yeah,
to make assumptions. We all take mental shortcuts all the time on all sorts of things and how we operate and work through our day, especially in really complex situations. It's human
yeah,
nature. Like we're going to simplify, right? The challenge is, especially when we're dealing with humans, and simplifying, like inevitably we're even if at the heart of the issue we might even be right. There's
mhm,
always nuance, and there's just always
yeah,
things that are not going to fit with our assumptions always. And so we
that's
just
right.
have to, I like how you said that humility. Like we have to just have that humility about how we go about interacting with other people. Have some grace for them because they're dealing with stuff just like we're dealing with stuff.
Yeah,
And then just assume that you don't actually understand what they're going through, how work is going for them, what motivates them, etc. And just learn and listen, like have conversations, get to know your people. And there's no substitute for just really knowing your people. And
that's
that
that's
that
it.
doesn't just happen by seeing their work products. It happens by talking with them and interacting with them and having meaningful, engaging conversations, and developing trust with them over time, right?
Yeah,
And then people are more willing to be vulnerable and genuine and authentic with you. And that will give you a clear picture into where they're coming from, what motivates them, what's driving them more in this moment. It's also important to recognize that people aren't stagnant. Like we are constantly adjusting, like and shifting,
that's it.
and sometimes it's a big thing, like life stage or career stage. But sometimes it's just like the little things in the day to days that a particular day of the week might be more hectic than other days of the week for an individual.
Yeah.
And knowing that can be helpful, right?
Right.
And then you can provide supports, you can provide resources, you can just be understanding of the types of issues that people might be facing. And what motivates me today may have not been the same that motivated me last year,
Exactly. Yeah.
or maybe what's really in my like what is really getting under my skin and driving me to do something today might even be a little bit different than what it was last week. I mean, so part of what I'm saying, I don't want to scare people off. Like it's everything's unknowable, like people are complicated, blah blah blah. Like yes, and we actually can through developing relationships of trust with people, we actually can get closer. We're never going to know everything. Of course, we're not omniscient,
Right.
but we can get closer and we can better understand. And then we can have an environment, a psychologically safe environment where people just feel supported and safe to ask questions and to try things and that just be that create that's just such a more healthy kind of dynamic to be in. And unfortunately,
Right.
we've all had experiences in organizations and with leaders where not only is that not true, like that's not how things are, but it's unfortunately sometimes the opposite. Like it's
Hmm.
toxic, it's hostile. You don't feel like you can ask questions. You just put your head down and kind of plow through and do what you need to do to kind of keep people happy without like upsetting people. And you're not creating and innovating in that kind of a space.
Right. Right. And it's just even having that conversation, right? Like
Yeah.
I worked with a leader who last month we were talking about this, how to develop your employees. And she was like, she's a finance director. And she's like, nobody on my team wants to grow. They're happy with where they're at. So how do I grow them or delegate stuff to them? And then we met individually a few weeks later, and she said, actually, I realized I haven't even ever asked them if they want to develop. I just assumed they didn't want to develop because they never asked for stuff.
Yeah.
And like that was like the key point for her. Like she was assuming based upon because her personality is, let me ask for more things, let me take the initiative. And her team may not be like that. Maybe they're happy with where they're at, but we don't know that yet. And you don't know until you just ask the questions and be that, that curiosity, but also that genuine, like I really do want to know what you want and how do I best help you get to that level.
Yeah, and there's a difference between like being happy where you're at and being complacent, being
Mm,
disengaged,
yeah.
right? And I think sometimes
Yep.
we couple those and we assume, oh, someone's not ambitious, they're not pushing for the next level, they're not, trying to move up, that they must be apathetic, they must be lazy, they
Mm,
must be, they're not truly invested. And that's not true. Like
yeah.
there's lots of people, again, it depends on a lot of different factors, but a lot of people, may be very comfortable where they're at. They don't want to go into a managerial role, for example.
That's right.
They're
That's
they're
right.
they're 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 really good individual contributors or part of a really great team that they love working with. And that doesn't mean they don't want to be challenged. That doesn't mean they don't want to learn, that they don't want to grow. It just means maybe they don't want to learn and grow the way you did.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and she said, this is the phrase I'll use forever with everybody else's. She said, I can't expect myself out of other people.
yeah.
I think that's
Which is
so
such a
insightful.
it's insightful and it really does show great humility and self-reflection because I think that is pretty much kind of the default setting for most leaders. And I'm not, this isn't an accusation, it's just an observation. That like you said earlier, they're successful, they've worked hard, they've been great individual contributors, they're rewarded, they're promoted. And it's just human nature. It's natural for you to kind of want to replicate that. Like you're
Right.
like, okay, this is what helped me be successful. I'm going to try to now do the same thing to help my team become successful. But that's why diversity is awesome. Like people have all sorts of different worldviews and backgrounds and skill sets, and you can complement each other through that variety. And as a leader, you don't want to replicate yourself. Like you already have you want to
Yeah.
you want
You
to
shouldn't
help.
want to. Yeah.
Yeah, you should want to help other people fulfill their potential, not your potential.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
it's hard, I think, for a lot of leaders to first recognize that. And then once you recognize it, that's a great first step. But then you actually have to start to shift how you're interacting with other folks,
Yes.
right?
That's
Based
right.
on that. And that's hard because you've always functioned a particular way, and maybe you've always functioned the way you've seen other leaders function, and so you think that's how you need to function. And there's just so much more flexibility around how you lead. The humility is huge, and it really can, when implemented effectively, like having appropriate levels of humility and vulnerability with your team really can help to foster those stronger, tighter relationships, greater trust,
Yeah,
and ultimately, you'll know better. You'll know what drives people. You'll know what matters to them. And maybe right now they're comfortable where they're at, but that doesn't mean in a year from now they won't want or be
that's
ready
right.
to move to the next level. And so,
Yeah,
the hard part about that is it is the hard work of leadership, of like being present, being available, listening, having conversations. And there's no shortcuts around that, right? It's not rocket science.
unfortunately, yeah.
It's not rocket science, but it is hard because it takes a lot of intentionality and it takes time and genuine, energy and effort towards those around you.
Yeah. I mean, that's why when I post stuff, like even on our podcast, like we just talk about the same things over and over again, right? It's always the same skill sets, it's always the same things you need to say. It's just you have to actually go out and do it. There's no substitute for that courage to go out there and have the conversation on an ongoing basis. Or it's the courage to even admit, I don't know the answer to this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's great conversation. We could go on with this kind of
Yeah, absolutely.
focus for forever, I think. It's super fascinating. But I do want to hone in a little bit and talk more specifically now within the nonprofit space. Resource scarcity. You're usually overworked, understaffed, under-resourced, like, and so it's a space that's really ripe for potential burnout. It's hard to attract and retain really great people because the truth is, great talent can go elsewhere for more money, right? And so, like, what are
Right.
some of the things you've seen from great nonprofit leaders who, despite that, within that context, they're able to really engage and develop their employees, and really leverage them to their fullest potential?
Yeah, and I'll say this hurts me because I'm a facilitator. I do trainings also, but training isn't always actually the right answer. And
Yeah,
in fact, when
absolutely.
when creating leaders, training is probably not super useful. What you really need is ongoing coaching, mentorship, giving them opportunities to develop a skill set. And so it's not always about the money. Like money is always a tight resource, and time sometimes is a tight resource too, but you have to at least give up time. And that's giving up time to have them either do some coaching through you or somebody else, do some mentorship with somebody else who they look up to or somebody who could really help them get to that next level or grow in that way they need to be. And also giving them opportunities to try new things. So not necessarily overburdening them with like, here, do this task I don't want to do. That's not necessarily
Right.
going to grow them
Offloading all your
anyway.
busy work, right?
Right. But things that will help them build that skills of communication, of managing other people. So maybe being a lead or being a mentor to some of the newer team members, leading team meetings, or helping with the scheduling of activities or things like that. Whatever might be helpful in building that skill set to think at a higher level, because you want them essentially to get out of the tactical every day. How do I fix this specific problem? And you want them to start thinking strategically. So inviting them into that thought process with you and like, hey, we need to solve for this problem. We're understaffed or we don't have the resources to finish this project. How would you go about doing this? Getting them to think at that higher level is gonna set them up for success. And it's not taking money, right? It's just taking you sitting there, being willing to sit with them and help them think through that process and start developing that skill set and practice that muscle.
Yeah. And not everyone who ends up in the nonprofit space, but disproportionately, like when people end up in the nonprofit space, it's often a conscious choice, right? Like they're willing to sacrifice maybe higher
Yeah,
salary for maybe better work-life balance, or other intrinsic benefits, that
right.
they value, meaning, purpose, those sorts of things, right? And so just recognizing that, and again, knowing what those drivers are, kind of that public service motivation. There's a whole literature on this, but it does vary across people. Like better understanding, like really truly, what are those intrinsic drivers? Maybe in the lack of more extrinsic drivers, what are the intrinsic drivers that are really pushing them? And for most people, you just identified one key one that is relevant to most people, and that is just opportunities to be creative and to learn and grow. And so
Yeah,
if you're pouring into your people, if you're investing in them, you're preparing them for future career opportunities, which is great. People value
yeah,
that. But they just like to work with a boss they like. They like to work in a team that they like. They like to be able to develop themselves and learn and grow and see progress. And that's what good
Yeah.
leaders do. Like they help build the bench strength around them,
Right.
and facilitate great, interpersonal communication and dynamics and culture so that people can accomplish the good things together.
Right.
And not everyone's going to be like super driven and motivated to be always like creative and innovative, but a lot of people, just being in that space of resource scarcity to like drive them to like optimize processes, be kind of more entrepreneurial in
Mm.
your mindset of like
Yeah.
create
Yeah. Yeah.
new approaches, innovate, and if something doesn't seem to be working, let's break it down and let's rebuild it better. That's something that excites a lot of people, and you can truly leverage that, and it'll help your organization work better, right?
Right. Have you read the book Drive by Daniel Pink?
Yeah, absolutely.
I always use that as like kind of the basic framework. Like every person still wants this stuff, their autonomy, and they feel like they mastered something in the purpose.
Hmm.
Um, but they still want to be able to do stuff and still feel like they contributed and have those wins and feel like they're doing a good job. Nobody wants to do a bad job out of the day, right? It may look like they're trying to do a bad job, but they're just going through stuff, as you mentioned earlier. They might just be going through some stuff that day or that week or whatever. But people generally wake up, they're like, I want to have the best day possible. I don't want to screw up, really. And so how do
Absolutely.
you help them get those wins? Is how do you understand what do they need to be able to do that stuff and feel like they're in control of their domain and feel like they're getting better at it every day?
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Well, Chris, this has just been such a fun conversation. I believe we could probably go on for hours, but
Absolutely.
I do know at the time I need to let you go here in a minute. Before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word for today.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm most active there. Chris Wong, LMHC. That's where I'm most active. You can connect with me there. My website, myleadershippotential.com. And if you're struggling with your team, you're struggling with your organization, you want to develop and grow them, give me a shout. My email is chris@myleadershippotential.com. I'm happy to always chat it out, even if it's not to work together. I just love giving advice and just helping people think through their issues.
I love it. Chris, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Chris can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.